Kevin Davis stared at the eviction notice until the words blurred together. 3 months behind on rent, his freelance graphic design income barely covering groceries. The pink slip from his corporate job still stung. Budget cuts, they'd said. Everything personal now. The storage unit listing felt like salvation. $40 monthly for basement space in an old Victorian on Maple Street. Mrs. Chen answered the door in worn slippers, her gray hair pulled tight, emphasizing sharp facial angles. "Keep to yourself," she said, avoiding eye contact while handing him the key. No noise after 9, no visitors. And Kevin, her weathered hand gripped his wrist with startling strength. "If you find anything that doesn't belong to you, leave it alone. Some things stay buried for good reasons." He nodded desperately. The basement felt cool as he descended creaking wooden stairs, a single flickering bulb overhead. His unit sat at the corridor's far end, surrounded by identical metal doors. The air carried dampness and something faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. The first week passed quietly. Kevin stored computer equipment and art supplies, creating a makeshift office away from his neighbor's blaring television. Mrs. Chen rarely appeared, though her footsteps echoed overhead nightly, always stopping directly above his workspace around midnight. During week 2, he discovered the doll, a cardboard box hid behind the water heater, buried in decades of dust and cobwebs. Inside yellowed tissue paper lay a Labubu collectible figure. The rabbit-like creature's oversized ears drooped forward, framing a face that shifted between cute and unsettling depending on viewing angle. Its small body wore a tiny red jacket, black button eyes reflecting dim light with liquid quality. Kevin lifted it carefully. The figure felt surprisingly heavy, its vinyl surface warm despite the basement's chill. A small tag dangled from its arm, property of Amy Chen, age 7. Below that, different handwriting. Buried March 15th, 1987. Returned March 22nd, 1987. Do not disturb. "Kevin?" Mrs. Chen's voice drifted downstairs, sharp with concern. "Everything all right?" He quickly returned the doll to its box, shoving it behind the water heater. "Just moving things around," he called back, wiping dusty hands. Her footsteps retreated, but he heard muttering in what sounded like Mandarin, words carrying worried tones that made his skin prickle. That night, working on a restaurant logo design, Kevin found concentration impossible. The basement felt different. Shadows seemed deeper, and twice he glanced up expecting to see someone watching from corners. The fluorescent light buzzed intermittently, casting harsh, unstable illumination. Around 11 p.m., he heard soft scratching sounds, like tiny fingernails against metal. The noise came from the water heater's direction. Kevin grabbed his phone's flashlight and crept toward the unit's back. The box remained where he'd left it, but tissue paper had been disturbed. The Labubu doll lay sideways now, black eyes seeming to track his movement as phone light swept across its face. Kevin reached for it, then jerked back. The vinyl felt damp, as if left in rain. But they were in a basement. Nothing should be wet here. He rewrapped the doll and closed the box, but sleep proved elusive. Dreams filled with images of small hands clawing through dirt, water seeping through wood, eyes following him through darkness. Morning brought another devastating email. Another client canceling their project, citing budget restructuring. His savings showed $247.63. Rent due in 12 days. Kevin buried himself in work, but the basement seemed determined to distract him. His laptop battery drained faster than usual. Files corrupted without explanation. The Wi-Fi signal flickered constantly. By afternoon, frustration had sharpened to anger. "Piece of shit," he muttered, slamming the laptop as it froze again. The sound echoed strangely, and in the following silence, he heard something chilling, soft water dripping onto concrete. The leak seemed to originate behind the water heater. Kevin squeezed into the narrow space, following the sound. Water pooled beneath the cardboard box, dark stains spreading across concrete in patterns resembling tiny handprints. The box was soaked through, cardboard dissolving. Inside, the Labubu doll floated in several inches of murky water, smelling of earth and decay. But there was no visible leak source, no broken pipes or seepage. The water simply existed, as if bubbling up from the ground itself. Kevin lifted the doll from its makeshift pool. Water streamed from its red jacket, button eyes seeming brighter, more alive. A paper had been tucked into its tiny pocket. A child's crayon drawing showing a little girl and rabbit-like creature beside what looked like a grave mound. Words scrawled across the bottom in unsteady handwriting. "Amy and Bun Bun forever. You found it." Kevin spun around, nearly dropping the doll. Mrs. Chen stood at his unit's entrance, her usual shuffling replaced by rigid stillness. Her eyes fixed on the wet figure with profound sadness mixed with fear. "I told you to leave things alone," she said quietly. "Mrs. Chen, I can explain." "No." She stepped forward, her slippers making no sound against concrete. "You don't understand. Amy was my granddaughter. She loved that thing, carried it everywhere. When the accident happened, she made me promise to bury it with her. Said Bun Bun would be lonely without her." Kevin's throat felt dry. "What accident?" Mrs. Chen's eyes never left the doll. "She fell down these stairs. It was dark during Chinese New Year, playing hide and seek with cousins. The ambulance said she died instantly, but..." She paused, fingers working her cardigan's edge. "3 days after the funeral, I found that thing on her bed, soaking wet, though it hadn't rained in weeks. I buried it myself, deep in the backyard." "But it came back?" A nod. 7 times I buried it. 7 times it returned. Always wet, always finding its way to this basement where she..." Mrs. Chen's voice broke. "I finally gave up, sealed it in that box and tried to forget." Kevin looked down at the doll. Water dripping from its jacket had turned cold, and he could swear he felt something like a pulse beneath the vinyl skin. "What does it want?" "Company." The voice that answered wasn't Mrs. Chen's. Kevin's head snapped up, but the old woman was backing toward stairs, her face white with terror. The voice had come from the doll itself, high and thin, like a child speaking through water. "Amy gets so lonely down here," the voice continued. And now Kevin could see the doll's mouth moving slightly, button eyes reflecting sourceless light. "She wants to play." The basement temperature plummeted. Kevin's breath came out in visible puffs, frost forming on metal surfaces. Mrs. Chen reached the stairs and began climbing frantically. "Don't leave it down there," she called over her shoulder. "If you leave it, she'll think you want to stay and play too." Kevin moved toward the stairs, following instinct that told him the basement had become a trap. He reached the stairs just as the door slammed shut above. The handle wouldn't turn, wouldn't budge as if someone held it closed from the other side. "Mrs. Chen?" He pounded on the door, but no response came. The doll in his hand seemed to grow heavier, and when he looked down, its head had turned to face him directly. "Kevin," it whispered, his name sounding wrong in that tiny voice, stretched and distorted like audio played through water. "Kevin wants to play hide and seek." The lights went out. In absolute darkness, Kevin could hear things moving. Not mice or settling wood, but deliberate small feet against concrete. The doll's weight had vanished from his hands, though he couldn't remember dropping it. His phone's flashlight revealed empty air where the Labubu should have been. But wet footprints leading away told a different story. They were child-sized, leading deeper into unexplored basement areas. "Ready or not, here I come." The voice giggled from somewhere in the darkness ahead. Kevin had choices: follow the footprints or find another exit. The door remained locked, but old houses often had multiple exits. He chose the far corner, where he'd noticed stone steps during his first week. The steps led to an exterior door that opened grudgingly onto a small concrete well, surrounded by overgrown bushes. Kevin hauled himself up, gasping cold evening air. Above him, Mrs. Chen's house windows glowed warm and yellow, but when he climbed the front steps and knocked, no one answered. He pressed his face to the glass, peering into the living room. Mrs. Chen sat in her chair, staring straight ahead, lips moving silently. On the coffee table beside her sat the Labubu doll, no longer wet, no longer moving, just a harmless collectible in a red jacket. Kevin's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Found you. Your turn to hide." He ran. 3 sleepless days followed in a cheap motel across town, paid with money he couldn't afford to spend. But the doll found him anyway. It appeared in his shower, sitting on the soap dish with water streaming down its vinyl face. It materialized in his car's passenger seat during midnight drives, buckled safely, button eyes reflecting dashboard lights. Each time, it spoke with Amy's voice, asking him to play, asking why he was running, promising that games were more fun when everyone participated. Kevin tried researching the Chen family, but public records showed no Amy Chen, no 7-year-old who had died in an accident. It was as if the child had never existed, except in an old woman's memories and a toy's persistent refusal to stay buried. On the 4th night, exhaustion won. Kevin fell asleep in his motel chair, laptop open, searching for non-existent answers. He woke to find the Labubu doll sitting on his chest, plastic face inches from his own. "You're tired," Amy's voice observed with genuine concern. "Don't you want to rest? Forever and ever?" Kevin's graphic design training had taught him to see patterns, understand how visual elements created meaning. Looking at the doll now, really looking, he noticed details previously hidden. The way its red jacket was stitched with symbols resembling Chinese characters, the tiny compass pendant hanging from its neck, the strange marking on its left foot that looked like a family seal. "You're not just Amy," he whispered, realization crystallizing. "You're something else wearing her face." The doll's expression shifted, becoming less innocent, more predatory. Amy opened the door, but she's sleeping now. I'm the one who plays the games. Kevin grabbed his laptop, fingers flying across keys as he pulled up Chinese mythology resources, searching for entities that possessed toys, mimicked children, returned from burial, seeking companionship for the dead. The answer came from a forum post about Jiangshi, Chinese vampires that could inhabit objects, especially those connected to tragically deceased children. Traditional methods required specific ritual components Kevin lacked. He needed something else, something using his actual skills rather than supernatural knowledge he didn't possess. The doll began moving on his chest, tiny hands reaching toward his throat. Kevin made a desperate choice. He opened his design software and began working. "What are you doing?" The voice had lost its childish quality, becoming deeper, more ancient. "Playing a different game," Kevin said, fingers steady despite the creature crawling up his neck. "I'm designing something for you." Using corporate logo design techniques, Kevin began constructing a binding sigil, not from mystical tradition, but from visual psychology and symbolic meaning principles. He layered Chinese characters for rest, peace, and return, combining them with design elements, creating optical illusions, patterns that confused the eye and trapped attention in endless loops. The doll paused, button eyes drawn to the screen. "What is this?" "It's a puzzle," Kevin explained, adding complex geometric patterns that seemed to fold in on themselves. "Every game needs rules. Every puzzle needs solutions, but this one has no exit, just like you've been trapped in your hide-and-seek game." The entity inhabiting the doll began laughing, but the sound wavered as its attention became increasingly focused on the screen. The sigil Kevin created operated on cognitive entrapment principles. Once you began trying to solve it, your mind couldn't let go. "You think your mortal arts can bind me?" "I think," Kevin said, adding final elements to his design, "that you've been playing the same game so long you forgot how to stop. But games need endings, puzzles need solutions, and every design needs balance." He hit print. The motel's laser printer hummed to life, transferring his digital trap onto paper. As the physical copy materialized, the doll convulsed, its grip on Kevin's throat loosening. The ancient entity had become caught in the visual maze he'd created, its consciousness pulled into the paradox of a puzzle promising solution but delivering only deeper complexity. Kevin grabbed the printed sigil and pressed it against the doll's vinyl face. The creature shrieked, not with Amy's voice now, but with something far older and more terrible. Light blazed from the paper as the binding took hold, and the Labubu doll collapsed into ordinary plastic and fabric. But Kevin's victory felt incomplete. Amy Chen might have been a vessel for something darker, but she had still been a child who died afraid and alone. He couldn't just trap the entity. He needed to give Amy herself the rest she deserved. Taking the now silent doll, Kevin drove back to Mrs. Chen's house. The old woman answered the door, her eyes red with tears, but clearer than they'd been in days. "It's over," Kevin told her, holding up the doll. "But she needs to be properly laid to rest. Not buried in fear, but honored for who she was before." Mrs. Chen nodded, understanding immediately. Together, they held a small ceremony in her backyard. Not a frightened burial, but a loving farewell. They placed the doll in a proper wooden box along with some of Amy's favorite things Mrs. Chen had kept. Hair ribbons, a small jade bracelet, a photograph of the girl smiling in her grandmother's garden. As they lowered the box into the ground, Kevin felt a presence lift and dissipate, not banished, but released. The oppressive weight that had followed him for days simply evaporated, leaving behind only the natural sadness of a family's loss rather than supernatural dread. Mrs. Chen insisted he keep the storage unit rent-free for 6 months. "You gave us peace," she said simply. "Amy can sleep now." Kevin's financial situation gradually improved as word of his unusual problem-solving skills spread through certain circles. People who needed designs that did more than just look good, who understood that symbols could carry power beyond aesthetic value. He never advertised these services directly, but referrals came steadily from clients who knew some problems required creative solutions existing outside traditional frameworks. He kept the printed sigil in a safe deposit box, along with detailed notes about the binding process. Not because he expected to need it again, but because he'd learned that some knowledge was too dangerous to lose and too important to forget. The basement storage unit became his permanent workspace, but Kevin never again ignored Mrs. Chen's warnings about leaving unfamiliar things alone. Some discoveries carried prices that went far beyond simple curiosity. Sometimes, late at night, when working on particularly complex projects, Kevin would pause and listen to the basement's silence around him. Not the oppressive quiet of supernatural threat, but the peaceful stillness of a place where the dead could finally rest undisturbed. The shadows in corners held no menace now. They were just shadows, cast by ordinary objects in ordinary light, serving their purpose as contrast in the greater design of a world where some endings, hard won and properly earned, could actually bring peace.